Anyway, I think today is fantastic, and the turnout today is wonderfully indicative that the time is right to push back against the deep integration agenda in Canada, and people are ready for it. And so this is the time to begin to pull our movements together. The deep integration agenda affects everyone, whether you're interested in preserving the environment, promoting immigration, defending human rights, promoting fair trade or working for peace. It saps at our very democracy and sovereignty, in my view. And so it is the issue that brings us all together into a common cause. I want to say that I feel that though the deep integration agenda is different than previous economic integration agendas. And I just want to take a moment out of my presentation to not just talk about the what of deep integration, but the why. Why is this coming around now? Why this seemingly new phase of discussions to draw Canada and the United States much closer? And I just want to take you back to a conference that I attended back in 2003. It was held at the really fancy Chateau Laurier down the road here, and it was called New Directions, Managing the Canada-U.S. Relationship. And it was hosted by a number of organizations, and the co-host of the conference was Tom D'Aquino, who, as you know, is the head of the Canadian Council of Chief Executives and the former head of the Business Council on National Issues, but he's rebranded it to the CCCE, kind of old wine in a new bottle, if you ask me. But and the conference was really looking at, Paul Martin was coming in. He had just won the Liberal leadership race and was about to take over Sussex Drive. And the conference was to look at what the new agenda was in terms of managing Canada-U.S. relationship. D'Aquino took the stage, and we sort of expected him to do his usual thing about enhancing economic integration, free trade, and things like that. And he did, of course. But he also had a new song in his repertoire, and it was about security. It was about security integration and military integration, something that you didn't really actually hear from the big corporate guys too frequently in the past, but now there was this new element. And in a handout that he was handing around from the CCCE, it said this. It said, the preoccupation of the United States with national security is total. We must enhance the interoperability of Canadian and United States armed forces on land, at sea, and in the air, including Canadian participation in a continental anti-ballistic missile system. So he was drawing these connection points between integration and NAFTA and military integration in the United States. And when I was listening to him, I had this image that is quite commonplace now, but it was an idea that he was prescribing a kind of fortress North America, where the security wall around the United States didn't go at the 49th parallel, but went all the way around Canada as well. So it included Canada. And we are inside the fortress with the United States. You see, 9/11 created a crisis amongst the business elites in Canada. Remember, the border closed for 3 days. And there had already been a number of protectionist measures being levied against Canadian exporters at the border. And there was a feeling amongst them that NAFTA, their great achievement, was now in jeopardy after September 11th. That the United States was going to begin to put security measures at the border that would erode all of those great victories that the big companies had achieved through free trade. Now, D'Aquino had a solution, and this is what he was trying to promote at this conference at the Chateau Laurier and elsewhere, that the way to keep the border open was to give the United States whatever security guarantees they wanted. And what would that mean to create that fortress North America? It would require Canada to completely give up its sovereignty in terms of security and foreign policy. The national security imperatives of the United States would have to become our own, because the United States would have to see us as virtually just an extension of their own defenses around the continent. We would have to join things like missile defense. We would have to participate in the war on terror. And it wouldn't be enough for us just to spend more money on continental defense and radars around North America, because to the Bush administration, defending North America involves fighting wars elsewhere. To the Bush administration, homeland security usually involves fighting a war in somebody else's homeland. So we would have to engage in that global war. And this is what we kept coming up against in the missile defense campaign, which we put in Missile Defense Round 1, was this connection, this feeling that missile defense and Canada joining missile defense or joining the war on terrorism wasn't about defending Canada from attack. It was about defending NAFTA. That's what it was all about. And so the government began to look at ways that we could work with the United States in a security manner. In Canada, this drew together two important lobbies. The corporate lobby, the guys that DeQuino represented, pushing for free trade and deeper economic integration, with the defense lobby, smaller but still powerful, made up of retired generals, conservative think tanks, the industry organizations that win all the contracts. And these two guys now had a common cause: to give security guarantees and to become integrated militarily with the United States so that the economic integration could be defended within North America. So these two came together. And what does this mean about things like Afghanistan, for instance? How does this connect? Well, you remember Rick Hillier was chosen to lead Canada's military by the Liberals at the time, partly because of his experience in the United States and his vision of transforming the military, which meant bringing in many of the military doctrines from the United States into Canada. And essentially how I would describe it is transforming Canada away from a traditional UN peacekeeper to U.S.-led warfighter. That is the transformation agenda. Hillier said, I can't do it without a lot more money. So the Liberals came through with $12.8 billion over 5 years. Massive increases of military spending are happening now. The Conservatives came in and put in another $5.3 billion on top. Massive military spending is required to fuel the military integration. If you don't have the money, you can't get the integration there. And so now Canada's military spending this year has now surpassed the amount of money we spent when the Berlin Wall was still standing. The peace dividend that happened during the 1990s has been clawed back. And now the budget is expected to even exceed in the next few years. There'll be huge increases coming in, well over $20 billion. In terms of military spending, we are now the 6th highest in terms of the 26 members of NATO, dollar for dollar. Hillier also knew that the war in Afghanistan would be a way to help score points with the Bush administration. The Martin government was convinced, as we now know, that by deploying a 1,000-strong battle group into Kandahar province, where they knew we would take heavy casualties and tremendous risk of our soldiers, that this would help build our relationship with the Bush administration by showing our commitment to the U.S.-led war on terrorism. And that's really what the war in Afghanistan is all about, is pursuing our national interests, as the government says. And the government describes our national interests as having a good relationship with our largest trading partner, the United States. But there is a fight back going on. The defense lobby and the corporate lobby don't win every time, and the record is mixed. Through popular movements and people going into the streets, we kept Canada out of the war of Iraq, out of that invasion. That drove the defense lobby and the corporate lobby nuts. You remember they were so angry that Canada did not join the invasion. Their next target then was to get Paul Martin to join missile defense, and we stopped them on that front as well. We kept Canada out of Bush's missile defense system. We can push back. We can push back to join in the fight back so that we can reclaim our position as a global peacekeeper once again. Thanks so much.
When we abandon sovereignty in the context of this SPP agenda or NAFTA, it is vested in the boards of directors of transnational corporations, not parliaments or courts or human rights commissions.